Hello everyone and welcome to our circle Anne Salve women. For today I'm going to be talking about my article, To Be Not Afraid, Stand Firm and Be Still. Now this focuses in on when you have a destiny and every one of us have a destiny, right? And many of us get sidetracked only because we think to ourselves there are other things that are drawing us away from it. And it could be many, many different fulfillments. I don't want you to think that it's just one thing to finish and then you're done, and therefore what else do you have left? And when we complete a focus and we get there, we have many foci in life. And then all of a sudden we have attained or we have accomplished and we've reached our success, then we have to move on to something else. But there's always this growing, there's this knowing in ourselves that we grow and we continue to grow and we continue to develop, and then therefore we move on to yet the next piece that we have to fulfill or that we need to just go ahead and merge ourselves into it and just be a victor of it all. But one of the many things that I've noticed in many people, and of course that would be probably me and looking back as well, like did I really do what I said I was going to do at the time I was going to do it? When you are going into that destiny, we have to remember to not fear what is around you. I've said many times before, and I love hearing this, that fear is that false evidence appearing real. And so in your mind there's just so many things that's causing you to feel like, if I can't, or what if I can't, and what's going to stop me? It's almost like you're spearheading toward the not succeeding rather than focusing on achieving. And so we have to be aware of that to really make sure that we have to tell ourselves, if we fall into the fear of what is around us, it's going to weaken us. It's going to make us all of a sudden think that we can't. And also standing firm, just amidst the attacks. You're going to have them. The more you do, the more you accomplish, the more there are things in life that people are seeing you're able to do. It's almost like you feel like there's this invisible foot sticking out trying to trip you. And you got to be ready for that. You got to be ready to, jump over these hurdles and say to yourself, you know what, no matter what, I have to be standing firm in the midst of these attacks. I get that they're going to happen. Embrace them. Just be aware of the fact that if they are there and when they are there, you are prepared for them, and that you should not have to say to yourself, oh, I didn't know it was coming. Yes, there are going to be times where you're going to be blindsided. I'm sure all of us can speak on parts, and as we grow older and we run into many obstacles in our lives, there are times that you do get blindsided and you are at just complete surprise as to what it was that got in your way, and you only have yourself to go, well, okay, at what point did I allow it to, though, right? And so then the last piece is being still in times of worry. I've learned panicism. I've read articles where all of a sudden it's people that just went into complete madness and not knowing what to do, and they stampeded over others. I remember sharing this article with my students at one point where they were in a dance club and the stage went on fire, and they're all trying to rush out, not realizing that the door opens inward instead of outward. And so they basically were creating a human block that prevented everyone from being able to get out, and so everyone burned down in that fire. And I just think how devastating, right, that we have to really think to ourselves, had they just said, okay, what do we need to do, you guys, let's get on out of here. And that's judgmental perhaps to really think that in a state of panicism that's the first thing you think about is let's calm down. But honestly, to be able to practice that and say to yourself, I need to think. I know that for myself, if I need to really just focus, I need to make sure that my mind is still and that I am making certain that in times of worry, having learned when I didn't, when I reacted, out of just complete feeling like everything was in disarray. Thankfully not that many times, because when I reflect on it, I'm like, how could I have done that better? And so now that you're strong, you're older, you become stronger, and you realize in times of worry, that's when you have to kind of stay still and go, okay, do I turn left? Do I turn right? Do I just don't move? Do I move forward? Do I move backward? There's just those moments where you have to realize that you just have to take a moment of pause. Just have to take a moment of pause. And so in the article, I returned back to that story of the two eagles in the sky. And really, there were two things that really stood out to me that made me think very deeply about what I was witnessing. First of all, very rare to see two eagles flying together. It was just beautiful. Love it. And looking up, I realized it was amazing to me, because you realize the one that wasn't going to attack by the three crows, if you read the article, there's these three crows. They're just cawing like crazy. And when they caw up in the open air, it's almost as if the world can hear them. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, this open air, how far of a distance has it echoed through for everyone to hear? And they're just, to a point where it's like you couldn't ignore it, And so they're cawing, but they're not only cawing on these eagles, but on one of them, they're literally biting its tail and pulling to a point where they're pulling it. It almost looks like it's just toggling from left to right and being pulled back. And here I'm looking at the other eagle, and I'm thinking, geez, the other eagle's not even helping. It's just flying right next to it, and like totally indifferent. And it made you wonder, like, does this other eagle even see this happening? And yet the one that was being bothered, seemingly bothered, because it just didn't act like it was bothered at all, as these three crows are like, for everyone else to hear, just tugging on it the whole time, and yet it continued to fly. And I just thought, how remarkable. When you see something like that, it makes you grow. It makes you it empowers you, and really makes you think, like, why? And when you think about why, and when you find an answer, deep inside, and really think about it, you just go, oh, I get it. Because you can reflect it upon moments of your life, right? When you've had, let's just go with the first one, when all of a sudden it's just flying peacefully next to the one that's being bothered by these three crows. I remember the very first time I was in the airplane, and I learned that you're supposed to put your mask on first before, giving it to your child. And I just thought to myself, so selfishly, like, there's just no way, I'm just going to help my child first. And you realize why they tell you that, because if all of a sudden you pass out and, you're out of oxygen, how in the world are you going to be able to help your child? Now you've lost two instead of just one, and, you don't want to lose anyone. But, there are reasons for why they tell you these things. And it's the same thing as I was looking at that eagle, and really, as it was flying, it made me realize that it did not help, because I look at the times and I go, what, how's that any different from what I've done in times in life where I could have helped? And then I realized that if I do help, it would actually weaken the other person. They would actually start to think and become dependent of my own actions rather than their own. And, when you truly, truly care about people, of course, there are going to be times where you're going to jump in there and you're going to defend them. And, sometimes my children didn't know that I was defending them behind their backs. But, there's a way to carry yourself in a way, in a manner of not letting people think that you've lost it, and yet that you've already won the victory. And that's how when I saw that eagle just flying next to the other person, it was almost like this eagle was giving the message, like, we've got this, and don't worry about it, just keep flying, without any message, without any type of gesture at all whatsoever. And when you can put yourself in that position and truly understand it, of course you're going to think to yourself, there are going to be moments when I am going to help. But when I looked at that eagle, it's like that pure admiration of going, wow, look at this eagle, not even trying to be defensive in any way, and just not even looking and acting as if there was any significance of these three crows that evidently are like cawing out loud for everyone else to hear, but these two just ignoring. And when I say these two, because the other one who was seemingly being tugged, and when I say seemingly, like literally I can see it, being tugged by these three crows, I saw that it was acting indifferent as well. I mean, it was flying at, and sure enough, it was going to the left, to the right, and sometimes being pulled back, but it just was not allowing the crows to stop its journey. It was still flying in this beautiful sky, beautiful blue sky that day, along with this eagle. And it's almost as if it was sending a message like, you're not stopping me from flying. I'm still going. And the more it seemed that they weren't doing anything about it, the more these crows were cawing. And I honestly think that's why we took note of it, because I can only imagine how long it had both, been in the sky where these crows were in the back. And they were doing everything they possibly could to deter them from their just soaring in the sky, and yet they didn't. And so I bring up the time where there are two stories. One of my children, we were at school, and there was this teacher and competition, but they matched it up with their child. And it just so happened that year there were many teachers who had also a child that was attending that school. And so for me, I did not rehearse, did not know what was going on, what kind of race it was. And so my thought is, game on. Let's go. And I knew my daughter was going to be the same way. It was like, okay, game on, let's go. And my only flaw perhaps was not realizing that my daughter's never seen a mini bike. It hit me later on, obviously, when I look back and I saw that she struggled. But I had always ridden a mini bike in this one school. I'd gone to many different elementary schools, but I went to one school where there was an after school sports. And so my PE teacher, many times they had like a gymnastics team, like a league gymnastics team that would follow after that. And so they always had all of these unicycles out. And so to my benefit, there were these mini bikes that I could actually ride. And it would look exactly like the ones that I'd seen, all that whole school year. So it was like second nature to me. When I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be easy. I get on that and I start pedaling and, not thinking anything about it. And I look back, and my child is like severely struggling. Now, I thought to myself, this is a no-win situation, like immediately. If you help your child in front of others, sometimes they will feel even more embarrassed because you are acknowledging that they need help. And that sounds crazy, but me being a child myself in some time in the past, I never ever wanted anyone to see me struggling. And so if I was struggling, let me laugh at myself, let me laugh at my own pain, let me find some humor in this moment, but you will not see me weak. And that is my mindset right away. When I saw my child back there struggling, I said to myself, my child's going to figure this out. And I'm going to stand here and wait for my child to, be able to finish. And, it dawned on me when I look back, if I had to think and take a picture of a moment, there were probably teachers that were like, how dare you? And, and probably caused confusion to the other students as well. But I make my choice, and I make my choice without guilt, because there's a quick process of thinking there, and you're doing it for your child and child alone. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's a moment of learning and development. And when you are that mother eagle, you got to make these harsh choices sometimes that you thankfully look back and go, I made the right choice then. And I honestly think I made the right choice there. And with my other child, kindergarten, you do everything you can. I was so proud of being a stay-at-home mom and being able to finally do it my way in the ways of thinking. I did not have that background where I could just emulate this, reading after school. Reading at, to bedtime stories or lullabies or any of that on daily basis, and breakfast in the morning, and they came home, and there was nothing to that effect. When you are an immigrant coming to America, like you are just, you understood, at least I did. I had to embrace the fact that my parents were going through their own challenges, and you had to survive on your own. And if you had any issues, why in the world were you going to share it with anybody else? Everybody else had their own issues. What are you going to do? Commiserate and compare and try to compete to see who had a harsher, a harsher day or deeper troubles? It was just anything that was going to be effective in a positive light. And so for me, I always remained quiet about anything, And so when I finally got to be a stay-at-home mom, and it's just the blessings, just my husband's ability to allow me to stay home, just like how important it was for my dad to as well. And it was never a discussion. It was just kind of just amazing that, you get this natural blessing to be able to do what you got to do. I took it like, I never took it lightly. I wanted to perfect it, and I wish I had kept this planner that I had. It sounded, it's so redundant. I mean, it looked redundant. If you looked at it, you're like, why would you write this over and over and over when it's the same darn thing? Because it was my pride to check them off, and it was just like my workout. I'd go work out, and then I would do, clean at home and do the things that I did for my children. And so, one of the things was, okay, hold on though. I would always have the clothes ready and so forth. But one of my children would always forget to eventually bring their coat. And I'm doing the same thing with my younger two right now, So it's like, why do you have to keep doing this over and over, where the punishment is really nothing that's going to change them from forgetting their coats? Like, what are you going to do, So I knew that eventually they would learn, because they would need that coat. They would go, oh, it's cold today, I'm going to remember to bring my coat tomorrow. Only because you've been a child yourself. You know that in times of stumbles, to prevent that stumble ever again, you have a plan of action to make sure that it never ever repeats itself. And so that one time when I had an opportunity, I loved having my children's friends come over to our home. That was just by my choice. I felt safer that way. I felt like I maybe semi-controlling to make sure that my children were at home with me rather than somewhere else. And, in that way, I knew that I would be able to care for not only my children, but theirs. And it made me happy. It made me feel secure. And so, when there are times, though, when you have a doctor's appointment and you just have to handle it the way you handle it. And I knew there are, stay-at-home moms around me. And so, I was able to get that reciprocated one day. And I had my neighbor take care. And, perhaps they were a little bit reluctant to do so. But, I sensed that, because when I picked up my child, all I got, understandably, I got this pullback, or just, kind of a scolding from the other mother saying, why did you not give your child a coat? And they walked out in the rain and all this stuff. And all I could do was just kind of giggle and laugh, probably upset them more, because that's how I do. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. But in the back of my head, I was like, he finally has learned, to bring his coat. I mean, what do you do? And so as a parent, I went home taking the lashings from my neighbor, and it was just like, I deserve that. I need to be told, oh, you forgot. Because from their perspective, it was wrong of me to. But in my mind, I had achieved my goal. Like, honestly, it was like, okay, my child's going to remember to bring their coat from here on and not forget it. So that's what you have to do sometimes. You have to understand that, when you're focused in life and you're doing you have to make sure that you can't be afraid of what is around you. You have to stand firm amidst attacks. You have to be still in times of worry. Otherwise, if everything is going to shake you up, it's going to control you. Your fears are going to control you. All of a sudden, everything that you had hoped would not happen will, because it's almost as if you're working mentally toward it, rather than telling yourself, all is good, all is well, I've got this. I'm calling it done already. It's already a success. I'm already victorious in this moment. And that, to me, is where perhaps people can just object to it and again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, okay, well, you're wrong. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but that's how I've done life. And when I look at my children and how much they've accomplished and how strong each and every one of them are, and with the joint partnership of my amazing husband, like, I realize that we do these things, and you're not going to be perfect at it. Many times I whisper to myself, I'm so sorry, when I reflect on moments where, you know, very rarely, honestly, I always feel like I've always preyed upon my actions. But when you think to yourself, I could have handled that better because I had a long day and I was just drained from, you know, my day of teaching or my day of parenting, my day of wifing, all of that stuff. I'm giving that as a word. But, you know, you really think to yourself, you have to give it your all. And sometimes your all may not be seen as the greatest move, but just like in any chess game, right? You know, it could surprise you at the end where there's victory. Because for me, there's a process there. And the process is not always for you. It's for those around you who you love dearly. And so when I think about those eagles, they're teaching each other. They were teaching each other strength. They were teaching each other to be, you know, firm, not be afraid. And I love that, to be able to reflect on watching two eagles and understanding why even animals do what they do. So in the words of my mother, God bless us all. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you were able to relate to what I've said today, whether you agree or disagree, but hopefully you know that you can only be the best of you in all that you do. And that's all you really need to start with. And if anyone around you sees that and knows that, then regardless of the outcome, there will be victory in the very end, as long as you say to yourself, it's gonna just keep going and never give up. The positivity will always be there. The light will always be there. It'll always overcome anything else as long as you stay that way. So have a great day, and thank you so much for listening.